Roommates was published in 2021, and her chapbook, New Yorkish, was published in 2018. She's working on another chapbook, Let's Get Together When It's Over, and a hybrid memoir collection. She facilitates a virtual memoir group. Weiman resides in Long Island City, New York.
It's really sunny. So can everyone hear me? So I was going to read this last, but since Deanne just read her piece on 9/11, I'll read mine. 9/11, the terror of being alone. The morning of September 11th, 2001, I voted early, then hopped on the N train in Astoria and traveled to my job at Golf Magazine. If I'd been facing east, I would have seen the first World Trade Tower billowing with smoke and flames. When I arrived at Park and 33rd Street, a coworker ran out of the building shouting, "The World Trade Center has been attacked." What? I didn't know what to do, so I took the elevator to the 7th floor. As soon as I arrived, my mother, then my sister, called to see if I was safe. Shortly after, we lost all phone connections. A number of us watched the news on television monitors used to view golf tournaments. Others gathered at the windows facing Park Avenue and watched as thousands of people streamed by below. I was hesitant to leave since I just arrived and didn't want to go back to Astoria by myself. Several hours later, the executive director offered to drive a few of us, but was headed to Westchester. I walked out of 2 Park Avenue alone. Not knowing which way to turn, I made a left on 34th Street. I was paralyzed. After all the media hype, I was terrified the Empire State Building would be attacked next. I didn't know which way to go. An empty bus appeared, and I shouted at the bus driver, "Where are you headed?" "Nowhere. I'm staying right here," he announced. A few minutes later, he turned the bus around and motioned to me. I jumped on the bus without knowing where it was headed. The bus filled with strangers, all exchanging their stories. The driver drove up the east side. At East 86th Street, I exited to catch the crosstown bus across Central Park. There were none. I walked across the gloomy park, watching helicopters in the sky and an unhappy couple walking east. I made my way to the west side to be with a friend. All the payphones were out of commission, so I arrived at her doorstep unannounced. She was happy to see me. We talked for an hour or so, but she wanted to watch the news. I couldn't watch the videos of the planes crashing into the towers over and over. I ventured back to Queens. I took a bus to West 57th Street, then walked to Times Square. After waiting for an hour for the shuttle, I walked to Grand Central. After that, I don't remember anything. Somehow I made it home. The sun is in my eyes. Okay. All right. The next piece is called Thoughts on Paper. It's kind of a hybrid piece. Paper mate, wish I had one. Paper box, couldn't find my way out. Paper towels. In my family, paper towels were rationed. You had to know when to use a paper towel and when to use a rag. Paperweight. A friend gave me an expensive Venetian glass paperweight. A work of art, she said. Aquamarine with gold filigree inlay. I kept it. It kept my bills from blowing away. Newspaper. I used to buy the New York Times every day. then Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Later, Friday and Sunday. Finally, Friday. Now I read 10 articles on my phone. I miss folding the paper into quarters and reading it on the subway. Paper mache. My father helped me build a paper mache zebra for the school art fair. We stayed up all night pasting strips of newspaper around a broom. When dry, we coated it with black and white house paint. Zebra was the size of a small horse, too big for a car. My brother and I carried her to school. Everyone seemed impressed. When the fair ended, I brought Zebra home. 4 months later, we moved to Michigan. She arrived at our new house with a broken leg. My father patched her up, but she did not survive the move to Wisconsin. Paper plates. I was between jobs and between apartments. There were only 2 places I could afford, one owned by a woman named A and the other by a woman named Z. A lived in Manhattan, Z lived in the Bronx. A did not have a sense of humor. Z laughed all the time. I preferred Z, but she had 2 cats, so I roomed with A, who kept kosher. A filled her closet with giant-sized packages of toilet paper, paper plates, cups, and at least 100 travel-sized containers of Kerry lotion, 2 sinks, 2 sets of dishes, and flatware. I lived in constant fear of placing the wrong plate in the wrong sink or the right plate in the wrong sink. To avoid conflict, I ate on paper plates. So did A. Term paper. I had come to terms. Paper. Remember when we used to write on paper? The flow of ink on the page, a form of ecstasy. Thank you. This next piece is a short memoir piece, and I don't know if I need to do this on the Upper West Side, but I will. Elizabeth Hardwick was a writer, essayist. She was the advisory editor of the New York Review of Books. She was my mentor at Barnard. In the time of typewriters. If you don't learn to type, you'll never get a job, my father said to me in high school when I quit a typing class. Elizabeth Hardwick called to tell me about a part-time job working for Barbara Epstein, who is one of the 2 editors of the New York Review of Books and the editor of the Diary of Anne Frank. Although I was a terrible typist and could not take dictation, I quit my full-time job and accepted the position. Who could turn down a job at the New York Review of Books? Some of the staff members told me horror stories about Barbara and how she yelled at her assistants and sometimes made them cry. The first week she was friendly to me, but I was intimidated. No matter how hard I tried, I made numerous typos and disconnected the phones. My tasks included typing correspondence, making edits to the manuscripts of Gore Vidal and Edmund Wilson, and reading unsolicited manuscripts. Never having enough time to read manuscripts at work, I brought them home. Who was I to make judgments about other writers? More anxiety. I fell behind in my reading. To make things worse, I wore an old mink coat that my grandmother had given to me. Who owns this coat? Barbara asked. I do, said my long, blonde-haired, blue-eyed self. She shook her head in disgust. By the 3rd week, I dreaded going to work. Barbara had already suggested that I practice typing. I practiced for hours, but I showed no improvement. I made numerous errors and carried a bottle of whiteout in my purse. The following Friday, she called me into her office. Do you know how to type? Are you practicing? You are the worst typist I've ever hired. Get Gore on the phone and bring me a cup of black coffee. My hands trembling, I brought her coffee and almost spilled it. Saturday morning, I was filled with panic and anxiety and called Penelope and Stuart, friends from the review. I revealed my plan to use the introduction of the Diary of Anne Frank that Barbara wrote for Eleanor Roosevelt. Penelope and Stuart offered to meet me at the Fisk building on Sunday morning. We entered the empty office and I placed a copy of the introduction to the Diary of Anne Frank on Epstein's desk. With a yellow marker, I highlighted the words, written by a young girl, and the young are not afraid of telling the truth, made me intimately and shockingly aware of the greatest evil, the degradation of the human spirit. Beneath it, I signed my name and wrote, I quit. Although relieved, I no longer had a job. Worse than that, I had to call Elizabeth Hardwick. That must have been awful for you, she replied in her honey-coated Kentucky accent. And it was. And this is for a break. This is a poem called Scarf, and if you don't know, variegated is multicolored yarn, and merino wool is soft and not itchy. In high school, I began knitting a scarf. By the time I was a senior, it had grown 17 feet long. In my 20s, I learned to cast off, made sweaters from soft, variegated merino yarn. I asked for simplicity. They handed me 3 needles and 8 skeins, a pattern of ripples, front, back, and sleeves, some stitches tense, others too loose, riddled with mistakes, different dye lots. No one could tell the difference except for me. Thank you. This is a little memoir piece called Green Before My Time. The summer of 1974, Bruce, my boyfriend, invited me to visit his family in Southern California. A few days after arrival, we drove north to see his cousins who had a swimming pool. Bruce and I frolicked in the large outdoor pool. We were young, happy, and blonde. I wore a beige bikini with white polka dots. That afternoon, I dried my hair and saw that it had turned green. I was horrified. There had been a chemical reaction with the chlorine. In high school, I began spritzing my brown tresses with Clairol Summer Blonde. That promised, be a summer blonde all year round. Over the years, my hair turned white blonde. I covered my green head with a red bandana. That night we drove to Berkeley and had drinks at a local bar. I removed the bandana. Green hair, shouted the man at the table next to us. I looked at him and smiled. When I returned to New York, I went to a beauty salon to have the green stripped. It was a damaging and costly process. I had the option to dye my hair brown, but decided to let it grow out. Although embarrassing and an assault to my vanity, I live with a widening dark stripe in the middle of my blonde head. I never dyed or colored it again. The next piece is a COVID piece from When Will We Get to, we'll get to whatever it's called. The name has changed so many times I can barely remember it. But, this is Zoom therapy, March 12th, 2020. The first 2 sessions, I had phone therapy. At the 3rd session, I asked if we could use Zoom. It took a few adjustments. One time it took 25 minutes to connect. We texted, left the meeting, and re-entered. It worked. Both my therapist and I admitted that we were anxious and worried that this could happen again. It didn't. I found it difficult to look at myself on Zoom and use speaker view. After a few sessions, I chose gallery view so that I was in the Zoom box next to my therapist. During my sessions, I argued over the evils of the Republican Party and Trump, expressed my feelings of frustration and isolation about the pandemic, and endlessly discussed my relationship with Nick. This next piece is called Family Tradition, and I don't know how many people here are familiar with the music of Hank Williams and Hank Williams Jr., but it's based on this song, and the song is by Hank Williams Jr. That bastard, Hank Williams Jr., came 4 hours late, rages her father. I hired the SOB for the fundraiser for the FOP, Fraternal Order of Police. Her father, a former executive vice president, now a promoter of country western music, and her mother, MA, PhD, pick her up at the airport wearing Stetson, cowboy boots, and embroidered leather boots. Stetson, cowboy hats, and embroidered leather boots. They're listening to the music of Hank Williams Jr. Frank, calm down, her mother pleads. She turns up the volume, taps her foot, and sings along. Lord, I've loved some ladies, and I've loved Jim Beam, and they have both tried to kill me in 1973. Hank Sr. drank himself to death, she says, and Hank Jr. fell off the side of a mountain. He almost died. He wears a cowboy hat and sunglasses to hide his scarred face, calls himself Bocephus. That's what his daddy called him. She speaks about the famous father and son, songwriter, singers, as if she knows them, as if they were family. Why did she go on about these things, Deborah wondered. When they lived in Vegas, her mother could recite the names and the history of each casino and its owner. The Pyramid, the Mirage, Taj Mahal, Caesar's Palace. She knew the downtown casinos too. She gossiped about Steve Wynn, the owner of Wynn Resorts, and was equally obsessed with Mayor Lansky and the Jewish Mafia. For 30 years or more, Deborah's father dragged her mother, Frida, across the U.S., isolating her from her family and making it difficult to feel rooted or secure. Frida, a liberal Democrat, a political junkie, born into a family of socialists, now lived in an anti-intellectual, racist, politically conservative community. Instead of lectures, theater, and parties, they spent evenings at AA and Al-Anon meetings. Frida feared small-town gossip and declined invitations that could have led to friendships. She felt her husband's addictions would reflect poorly on her. I'm very proud of my daddy's name, although his kind of music and mine ain't exactly the same. If I get stoned and sing all night long, it's a family tradition. Deborah's father wasn't a bad person. Like his father, he drank, smoked, and gambled. Once he ran off with a woman. Whenever Deborah and her siblings asked their mother why she stayed with him, she'd say, "Where would he go? He couldn't survive without me. My mother took care of my father," she'd say. It's a family tradition. Okay, this piece is called Godiva Chocolate. Okay. When I worked at Hachette, a division of an international media company, instead of a holiday bonus, we received 4 gifts that were bought in bulk. I gave them away except for the box of Godiva chocolates. In a week, I would be traveling to visit my family in Las Vegas and attend a holiday party. The Godiva chocolates was a perfect gift. 2 nights before the trip, I began to feel resentful about the gifts. Why should I give them all away? Despite being lactose intolerant and not a chocolate lover, I opened the box of assorted Godiva chocolates and ate 1 piece. I waited for the inevitable and nothing happened. So I ate another and another until I devoured half the box. 8 pieces and I didn't get sick. Oh my God. The next evening I challenged myself again. There they were staring at me, decadent, dark chocolate truffles, raspberry star, midnight swirl, and a dark ganache heart. I ate them all. After decades of abstaining from chocolate, this was astounding. I ate the entire box of Godiva chocolates and didn't get sick. The following week, I went to the mall in Las Vegas with my sister. We stopped at a candy store where they were giving away free pieces of chocolate. Do I dare? I did. My stomach became a little queasy. Then I realized that I was a Godiva chocolate girl. Can I get one more? I'm just going to read this. These are snippets, just little pieces, things that my mother said. And it's in memory of my 95-year-old mother who passed away in April. She was extremely political and always asking me to write about her. And God knows I have. She just didn't know it. So she despised Trump, hated social injustice. All her life she supported the ACLU, Southern Poverty Law, the ADL, the JDL, Planned Parenthood, and Emily's List, even when she could no longer afford it. Notifications. When she was 92. My mother calls while I'm at dinner. Mom, I can't talk now. You have to hear this. Mitch McConnell broke his shoulder. My mother on Trump. Is he dead yet? Being shot and dead is too good for him. He needs to suffer slowly. There's a new drug to improve the brain. Bill Gates uses it. If Trump took it, it wouldn't work for him. And then in April, when she was in the ICU, she said to me, "What did Trump do today?" And I said, "I don't know." So she asked the male nurse. Anyway, thank you all. Thank you, the West Side Community Garden, West Side Arts Coalition, and David for hosting this, and now Erica Mapp, who will follow me.